Today I'm joined by Michael Muhlfelder, a fractional CRO and sales leader who spent decades helping B2B SaaS companies fix what's actually broken inside their go-to-market. He's a founder of Calm Ocean Sales, where he works with companies from pre-revenue through 25 plus million to improve sales efficiencies across the entire funnel, from lead all the way through renewal. Michael brings a sharp operator's perspective on what's really happening in sales right now, especially as AI starts to reshape how teams prospect, sell, and retain customers. I hope you enjoy the show.
Hey, Mike. So I just want to say thanks again for jumping on our podcast. And, we had a pre-conversation about a week ago, just to kind of see if this was going to, see what kind of topics we can talk about. And what I really loved about, what you were sharing and is just kind of your methodology and your thought process about just sales. And so before we hit record, we literally were talking about the end of the quarter. And so we'll dive into that in a second, but I'd love to have the audience just kind of know a little bit more about who you are and just really what you focus on, how you got to where you were. So can you just kind of share a little bit more about your background?
Sure. So I'm a career sales guy. I started in B2B sales long before we had any technology. We worked off of index cards, manila folders, landline at the office. We had zip code territories, driving territories. You knew where the payphones were next to the men's room, so you could hop out of the car and make a couple of calls. And then we got automated. And I was one of the first salespeople to be automated. I moved into tech sales in the mid 1990s during the Evolution mainframe client server. And I was selling ERP and I hated it. That was just not a good job for me. It was really boring. And it kind of fortuitous that at the same time, this market started to form around what was called technology enabled selling, which became Salesforce automation, which became CRM. I said, that's interesting. Selling software to sales guys, that seems easy. It wasn't. But we learned a lot and it was a ton of fun. And so I went through kind of the cycle as an individual contributor and then moved into sales leadership roles just after the dot-com bust.
Wow.
And
okay.
yeah, so I've been through kind of all these cycles.
I was just going to say, you've seen the whole spectrum.
But yeah, I graduated from college in a recession. I was working in selling payroll when all of the banks failed in 1990, 91. Because of the real estate crisis, the real estate flips. So yeah, it's been quite historic. And all along the way, but I've learned and earned and have fun, right? So through the sales leadership roles, I finished in CRM. I spent a bunch of time in the integration space, and I led teams, North America, CRO, RVP, kind of all the levels. And I built one of the first BDR teams back in 2013 in Boston when when our leadership was like, you're going to spend how much to do what? Don't you have salespeople to do that? And, now here we are. So I was working for an integration firm as their VP of sales. We got acquired by private equity. Then the private equity firm said, yeah, we don't need these executives. And they started to cut people. I was first out the door. Ended fine. And I decided at that point, that was 3 years ago, that I would see if I could actually run my own business after years of thinking I could. So I started my consultancy. And when I started, it was called a fractional CRO. And I evolved that to what's now called VP Sales as a Service, meaning and you can acquire me as a point solution or as a platform.
Interesting.
So I do point solution work, meaning, hey, we just have this one project, this one go-to-market issue we need to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And I do that. And those projects can be 60, 90 days. And then I have others where I am the head of sales. And those projects tend to be more in the 6 to 9 month range.
Okay. I was going to ask you about that because when I saw that, I was like, VP of service as a VP of sales as a service. I was like, that's an interesting way of how you're kind of phrasing that and positioning it. I love how you added some context behind that to understand, because it's a different way of positioning yourself. I've not seen that, from a VP of sales, CRO kind of stuff.
Yeah. So this is, it's part of the learning. So I've been through now, I'm on, I would say, my third evolution of the business in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And a little over a year ago, I was in between contracts and I was trying to figure out like, what? The challenge in this space is that there are now a lot of people, as you know, calling themselves fractional. And I don't mean it in a derogatory way. However, a lot of the people that are fractional CROs and CMOs and CFOs have actually never held the title. They haven't built
Correct.
anything.
Yep.
So two things were happening. One was it was diluting the message and people like, oh, another fractional CRO. And the other thing was it has a built-in objection, at least for the CRO, because I would talk to founders or even the VCs and PE guys, the investors, and they would say, well, we have a CRO. Or, well, we're not there yet. So I was, and that's hard to overcome. Like, oh, well, I know you have a CRO, but you need another. No, you don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was listening to a podcast, great guy named Jacob Warwick.
Okay.
And I was like, he was talking about value and repositioning and his own evolution. And it just clicked. I was like, oh, I need to really differentiate myself. And that's where it came from. So I was on a drive. By the time I finished the drive, I had kind of recooked the business. Walked into my girlfriend's house and said, no, hold on. I gotta sit down. I gotta do this. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And so, what I also found kind of interesting is how you've named your company as well too. Can you kind of, is there a story behind that? Because, call motion sales, like, because I feel as though I've been on the ocean before. It can be calm. It can be very soothing. And then other times it's chaotic and just a mess.
It can go from one to the next instantaneously.
Correct.
So I live near the ocean. I've spent my whole life on near the ocean or under the ocean whenever I can. That's my preferred place is underneath.
Love it.
So part of it is, the play on words, right? Say, SALES versus SAILS.
Yep.
But what we really desire when we're running a business is calm. Right. And there's a book written years ago, Blue Ocean Strategy, one of my favorites. And that's right, from a marketing standpoint, that's what we're trying to find is our blue oceans. So when I came up with the name of the business, part of it was my affinity for the water and for the ocean.
Yeah.
And part of it is that, that thing that the elusive dream that we're always chasing as leaders is just to get to a calm ocean. And especially, today, end of quarter for a lot of folks, it is a frothing Red Sea.
It totally is.
And all we want to do is we're just treading water. I just want to survive and get to tomorrow. We're thinking it's going to be calm, and it's not going to be calm tomorrow. But so that's the goal of my business is to bring my clients to a place where it's calm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when it's calm, you can think, you can plan. You can't do that when you're fighting for your life. You just can't.
Yeah.
So that's where it came from.
That's awesome. I think that's, I love how, some companies, or even consultants like play with words a little bit on what they describe. Like for my company, for instance, Boulder Media Co., I graduated from University of Colorado. Boulder's my alma mater. Love that town. But I spell my company without the U. And so I believe in doing, bold marketing. However, I also kind of wanted to pay a little like tribute to my, my university. And so people are like, did you go to school there? I'm like, yeah, there's a story behind that. So it's just an interesting way how some folks have different ways in how they position their brands. So I love it. I love hearing that story and that background. I think it's important.
That's great, by the way. So using like your university or your hometown are great because people have an affinity for those two things.
Yeah.
You should have an affinity for your alma mater, hopefully. And then there's all the, not the controversies, the allegiances and the
rivalries.
Thanks. That's the word. I'm from Boston. You would think I would know rivalry for sports.
Yeah.
So there's almost an automatic conversation started there. So I love that. I hadn't realized that's where the name came from.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's funny because, I graduated from the Lee School of Business, it was great. I enjoyed my time there. When I was going to school there, we had a great football team, and then for the past 20 plus years, it's been horrendous. And then we got Coach Prime and things got a little chaotic. And so last year we got struck by reality, but it's still kind of one of those, just neat little moments, if you will, of of like seeing those things and enjoying what you see at your university, but then also whenever you're able to start a consultancy, if you will, and kind of play a little words with it, it's just when people hear the story, they're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That's really cool. So it's fun.
Yeah. And by the way, there was obviously some people will use their name.
Huh?
I can't use my name for
Yeah.
a business. People, seriously. I mean, I'm the only Michael Muhlfelder in the world from a professional standpoint. There's like one guy in Germany with the umlaut over the U, but other than that, I'm it. But still, people are gonna be like, hey, how do I find that Muhlfelder sales guy?
Yeah. No, I'm the same way too, because it's like, I'll get the last name like Lorenzo, Lozano. I'm like, it's Lozano. And so it's like, you know what? I'm not going to do anything with my name. I'll try to just like, put that off to the side, take a little pride out of this thing. So that makes complete sense. I love that. I want to dive into kind of like one of our questions that we were talking about prior, and just kind of like this whole hyperspeed trap, and I think this is a good transition because of where we are. We're at the end of the quarter. Everyone's going a little crazy. But then there's also these moments where, as you're kind of, where we are today, and I know that this is not going to probably age very well because how AI is just kind of shifting a lot. But, you've said before that, if you automate a bad process, you get worse faster. And in the age of AI, like, how do leaders distinguish between a speed problem and a process problem? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So there's a wonderful place to jump off. By the way, it's not my quote. I got it back when I was selling ERP.
Okay.
Early days of workflow when there was an analyst who wrote it, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Automate a bad process, get worse faster. AI allows us to get worse at hyper speed, which is super dangerous.
Yeah.
One of my other favorite quotes is from Richard Petty. And his quote was, win the race as slow as you can.
Well, that's interesting. I've never heard of that. I love the guy.
Yeah, which, I mean, if you think about it, like, the faster you go, whatever you're doing, the more likely that you're going to have an accident.
Yeah.
Well, even if it's like spilling your coffee because you were moving too fast through the house. So like just that the notion of just slowing down a little bit
Mm-hmm.
allows you to see things and operate differently. So this idea of using AI to move faster creates a whole set of underlying issues. And by the way, the caveat here is I am a huge AI enthusiast. I have my own podcast on AI that I do with two other guys.
What's your podcast called?
It's called 3 Takes on AI. And
Okay.
it's two old guys like me. One's a marketing guy, I'm in sales, and one's more implementation and services. So we are not technologists, but we see, 80 plus years of experience.
Yeah.
And if you implement an AI solution or you get your team trained on an AI solution and you don't see an appreciable difference in the outcome, then the problem is not in the technology, it's in the process. And kind of the hill that I'm standing on top of right now is we're implementing all of this technology, AI technology, changes and improvements to the sales and marketing stack, and we're not seeing more people making quota. And that says to me, that's not a technology issue, that's a process issue.
Yeah.
And as I work with founders and I talk to sales peers and all the things that I read online, and I read a lot, there is a significant gap in knowledge and process. And I'm fanatical about this. I write about it. I talk about it every day. It starts a qualification. And we have not taught salespeople how to qualify an opportunity. And if you don't qualify the opportunity, you end up downstream with no decision, deal delay, customer prospect ghosting you. And that's not fixed by AI.
Yeah. I'm glad you're bringing that up because, it's something that I've kind of said as well too, that AI is an amazing tool, but it exposes your weaknesses, and as you kind of said, it exposes it at hyperspeed really. And it's actually bad. It's demoralizing. It's going to be where, where you're at the end of the quarter and you're like, crap, we're not even close to our numbers. And we thought that, with these automations, we'd be able to do X, Y, and Z, and we should have been able to hit our forecast. And like, how the hell are we going to go to our board in 2 weeks to explain this? Like, those are real tough conversations. And again, I'm a huge enthusiast of AI. I think it's amazing. I feel like I'm getting injected with steroids half the times because it's making me do things at a hyper fast pace. But sometimes like your quote with Richard Petty, just like slowing down, it's probably the smarter thing to do. And then finding where you have gaps in your process and leveraging AI to help you with that.
It's simple. And so, by the way, another caveat, and I'm not self-deprecating about this. I'm not that smart. I'm actually a really simple guy. And for that reason, I need to kind of make things simple for myself.
Yeah.
So I do tend to break things down that way. So there was a co-founder. I worked for Siebel Systems. One of the co-founders is a guy named David Schmeier. Schmeier had a great comment that it was in our sales onboarding, and I've carried it for almost 30 years, and it was write it in crayon. Write it in crayon. So that's how I operate. It's how I like to have things explained to me a lot of things, and it's how I like to explain things so that there's no miscommunication. You know exactly what I mean and what I'm asking for. In some ways, AI does allow us to write things in crayon for people, to make it really, really simple and to do it quickly.
Yeah.
But we're not training people to do that. And when you're a busy executive, like an economic buyer, and you're trying to process a whole bunch of things all at the same time, you want someone to say, hey, I got something, here's an easy one for you, Javier. Right? Like, oh, good. And you're like, push away all the other stuff. Give me the easy one that I could feel like I got something, like check that off by the PA. So let's make it easy on people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like it's I think this is a great segue to like I guess a follow-up question to what you're kind of saying and making it easy, is that it's almost as though we've gone through this phase of like the fat, dumb, and happy phase, if you will, or fat, dumb, and lazy. And, we talk about how easy inbound leads have made sales teams to be like, I guess, soft, if you will. And AI starts to kind of generate more just noise in the inbox, and how to retrain sellers, and so how to actually prospect correctly and really build that human connection again. Like, what are your thoughts about that? Like, cause I see where you're coming from. I mean, there was a moment of like where you were running around going to the payphones and really hustling and being creative. There's actually something to be said about that. And now we're kind of like, we want to be fed.
Yeah. And listen, I always wanted, every now and then you'd get what we call the call-in lead, and it would be somebody like one of your bankers, or, hey, Mike, I just did a loan for somebody opening a business. They're going to need payroll.
Yeah.
Or it's somebody where you would, foot canvassed or cold called, and they actually called you back. Could be months, years later. And we're like, yeah. But we're not teaching properly how to handle the inbound. And it's not so much that I think it's making people lazy. It's that it's dumbing down the sales skill. So like back in the day when we were driving around our territories, zip code territories, you knew every business in your territory.
Yeah.
So when a new business showed up, you're like, oh, that's a new business. And if you, but you also had some back to the thing before about hometown. You had commonality with every single person you spoke to.
Yep.
Like if it was raining, you could talk about the fact that it was raining or snowing or the hometown team, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And we're not teaching that. And so we can be local anywhere from wherever we are. As long as I know where you are, I can figure out some intersection of commonality.
Okay.
And we don't train that. But then on the inbound, and this is something that I got kind of dialed into, was really accidental back in 2017 when I was a CRO. We got a lot of inbound. I had a BDR team. I was listening to a call. I was actually on a plane, listening to a call, and the prospect said, I've told this story so many times, by the way.
Okay.
Prospect said to my BDR, "Are you banting me?" And the tone of the conversation changed immediately.
Ooh.
And it was on the budget question. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I started listening to different calls, different BDRs. And at roughly the same point in the call, even though it wasn't an actual script, but it was, a process. At the same point in the call, the calls were going cold. I was like, oh, this is a problem. And what we ended up morphing to, and I have it on my site, and I talked about this endlessly, is the first question we ask a prospect is, what happened? If you're coming to me,
Yeah.
there's a reason for it. And this is something that we haven't taught salespeople. In B2B, there is a trigger event on a qualified opportunity. On the outbound, it works. It still works, but it's what happened when we called you, when my BDR called, or whatever that process is, that you set time aside in your calendar, because I know it's packed.
Yep.
And the answer to what happened, which is not the business problem, but it's Mike was in a meeting with Javi. Javi said, if you don't get this integration fixed between Salesforce and NetSuite so I can close the books on time, I'm going to go and find a new head of RevOps.
Yeah.
Oh, so that problem that's existed, the pain, has been there for a long time, but there was no reason to do anything until Micah told you, fix it or you're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the business got in trouble, or they can't go into a new market. But whatever it is, what we want to know is, what was the thing that moved you from pain to untenable? And that has not changed in the 35 plus years I've been selling, is that nobody buys because they're in pain. They buy because they cannot do something that they need to be able to do.
Yeah. It's something I've always said to just, different leaders at different points, is that selling is an emotional thing. Like, you're trying to create an emotion by your talking, verbally, but marketing is the same thing, but you're doing it with words. You're doing it on a screen. You're doing it in other ways to create an emotion, to create a trigger. They're both trying to do the same thing. They're trying to sell you in a way to buy a solution to your problem, because you can't solve it. And so, I guess where I'm trying to get to with this is, like, what do you do to help, I guess, to make people understand that if they can't do something, if they have this pain, but if they can't do something that they should be doing, like, what is it that you do to kind of, like, agitate that? Because at the end of the day, I feel like as though when something gets agitated is whenever you and I make a transaction and our buyers make a transaction, whether it's on a screen from a marketing perspective or whether it's on the phone, like you and I.
So very important point from what you just said. Sales is a transfer of emotion. And that emotion is happening from one human to another human. Obviously, it doesn't count if you're buying something on Amazon, a Temu, whatever. So we're really talking B2B, which is still a human-to-human interface. Such, there is an emotional component to this. And even, like, I've worked in quantum computing with quantum engineers that are supposedly not very emotional. It's still a transfer of emotion.
Yep.
And AI can help you learn that and help you with your talk track, but it can't replace the human-to-human connection. So what we want to understand in the first two steps of the process, qualification, discovery, one is, what happened? What was the trigger event that made you want to talk to me?
Yeah.
Second thing is the actual business problem. Okay, so you can't, we'll use the integration thing. Okay, so you can't close your books on time. So what? What does that mean? Is there a financial impact to that? Does it mean, like, can you not, are your receivables off as a result? Can you not report to the street on time? What is it? And what does it cost? And there needs to be a financial cost to it.
Yeah.
Because if there's no financial cost, they're probably not going to spend any money on it, especially now.
Exactly.
The third thing we want to know is, who owns the project? I can have personal pain, but that doesn't, and I can even ascribe a business problem to that personal pain.
Mm-hmm.
But unless a senior executive has said, go fix it, you're going to land in no decision.
Yep.
Because no senior executive, CEO, CFO, and again, especially now, has bandwidth. So they're not going to say, Mike, it would be really great if you went out and gathered 9 proposals for a forecast management solution. Bring it to me, and then we'll decide if we want to do that in 2027. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So by understanding what the trigger event was, is there a severity and level of pain and financial implication
Uh-huh.
drive the process? And a senior executive is saying, you need to fix it by this date. And the date that we want to know is, what's the date you want to be in, you need to be in production. Because we've been trained to ask close date, and then close date moves. The in production date generally doesn't move very much.
Mm-hmm.
If a senior executive has a mandate to get something done, it needs to get done. You can't go back and be like, oh, we're going to delay for 6 months or a year. Really, your CEO said it's okay to delay that. So those are the things we want to understand. And then in the discovery process, we get more into the nuts and bolts of the problem itself. What's the magnitude of the problem? Where does it exist? How long has it existed for? What's the benefit to fixing it? And can I fix it or not? Because what you don't want is, you don't want to try to put be the proverbial round peg, because
Yeah.
you're going to get kicked out of the deal. You're
Yeah.
better off saying, you know what, after discovery, you know what, we've been through a lot. I understand better. We can handle this, this, and this, but we can't handle the other stuff. Now, maybe another vendor can.
Mm-hmm.
That's up to the other vendor. I'm not going to sell for or against them. But I also know that in many of those deals, the prospect will come back after talking to the other vendors who claim they can do everything and they can't. And they go, you were actually straight with me. You told me what you could and couldn't do. You taught me a few things. And now we're in the deal. So when you get to things like proposals and negotiation, it should be pretty anticlimactic if you've done the front end of the process right. But that's not what we're teaching people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And implementing an AI solution, by the way, doesn't solve that problem.
Yep. And I'm glad you're kind of bringing that up as well too, because I mean, it's getting back to the basics and fundamentals. It's understanding that you still got to do your blocking and tackling. You still got to do, those little things. And so I think that's huge.
So kind of, I'm sorry to interrupt, but like the
No,
other
go
thing
for it.
that's really important here, and it's great that, with our two, respective roles, and it popped up again today on LinkedIn. I'm always surprised when it does. It's 2026, for crying out loud. The lack of linearity and partnership between sales and marketing.
Oh my gosh,
There
don't get me
should
started
be
with that.
there should be no daylight between sales and marketing. And there
Yes.
needs to be closed loop feedback at every step and stage, so that marketing can't say, we've been giving sales great leads and they just can't close them. And sales is saying, marketing doesn't even begin to understand what the prospect wants. No, take that away. Marketing should be on the sales forecast calls.
Yes.
If you have a CRO and CMO, they should be meeting every single week and going through the deals. And if you're not doing that, you don't get to be surprised at the end of the quarter when you miss, or when your CFO cuts your marketing budget because sales isn't making their number.
I'm glad you bring that up, because that is something that I pride myself in. I mean, I came through sales, so I have an understanding of hitting quotas and hitting numbers, and I get that. But like, that is, there should never be any kind of like, tossing things over the fence, if you will, and then just be like, that's your problem, not my problem. I mean, as a marketing leader, as a sales leader, you should respectively both own the same revenue number, because you're impacting it. Like, you can influence it as a marketing leader. You may not impact it as in like, I brought in this deal all the time, but what I'm saying is that you should own that number together. So if you miss quota for the quarter, it's not because of sales, it's because both your go to market and your marketing and your motions that you were creating and sales didn't figure it out. And there's nothing wrong with that, but just own it and then just pivot for the next quarter.
So I love the title of Chief Revenue Officer, and it's rarely used properly. The Chief Revenue Officer should own everything that's dollars. You have a CFO, a CEO, a CRO. The CRO owns all of it, so that, marketing can't say it's sales, and sales can't say it's marketing. Customer success can't say, well, we're doing our job. One person has to ultimately be accountable for it. And otherwise you're not building, you're building conflict into the model. I like tension in the model, a little push and pull between the sales teams, maybe between sales and marketing. That's fine. But when it's conflict, things aren't getting done. And one of the best things I learned working for a PE firm was focus. Focus. And I hammer that into people all the time, into my clients. Like, I get that you have this product that does all these amazing things, or you have 3 different products. What's the one product that has a moat? And just stay with that until you've completely nailed it,
Yes.
and then go and do other things.
Yes.
And it's again, we're so enamored with AI, but we forget that there are immutable laws of business. Henry Ford, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. He made one car only. It was 2 doors until he really understood assembly and distribution. Amazon sold books.
Yep.
That was all they sold.
Yep.
Because until they understood search, distribution, supply chain, and then they started to branch out to other things. Oracle sold database. Like, it doesn't pick the industry. Nike. So I just wrote about this. Nike sold.
I saw that. Yeah.
The Nike Cortez.
Yep.
There's no big brand behind it that people know today.
Yeah. I love it.
And and every business starts that way.
Yeah. I love that you're saying that, because like, I feel as though whenever as leaders we tend to lose focus, it's whenever there could be opportunities for churn from the leadership side, because you're chasing that shiny object. And I know that you've mentioned that, it's you can kind of predict a company's churn by kind of looking at their AI implementation. And so what are some of the red flags for like sales or success, like their tech stacks, that signals a company is about to lose human touch and maybe its customers?
It's simple. It's when AI or automation replaces the human. And we see it, especially in large companies, in companies with very high volumes of customers. And I could understand that, by the way. If you have 50,000, 100,000, 500,000 customers, you have to have automation. I get that. But with that automation, you also should have AI looking for signals, good and bad, in your customer base.
Yes. Yes.
And we're not seeing that. And I would hazard a guess that you feel this, and everybody who's going to listen to this is as well. We desire service. We're spending money. We want help. It is so frustrating when you call or go to a business and you just want your problem solved and you can't get to a human. And what ends up happening is, like, screw it, I'm going to go somewhere else. What's missed is that, part thanks to AI and just the advent of technology, it is much easier now to churn as a customer, to defect, than it ever has been. SaaS makes it worse, right? I've got an annual contract, at the end of the contract, or a monthly contract. At the end of it, I'm not getting value, I'm gone.
Yeah.
But if the AI that you've deployed isn't tuned for the signal, you will lose. And going back, remember we did NPS scoring, and the VP of customer success was like, telling me, you don't understand. You didn't understand. I was like, no, you don't understand, because you're asking a question, and the question isn't telling you if the customer's going to churn or not, because you're asking the customer if they're happy.
Yeah.
And happy customers churn all the time. They churn because their boss has been turned on to another solution and they're gone. Or you do one thing and you take them from happy to unhappy and they're gone. And that's the end of it. And
I love that you're kind of like double clicking into that signal piece, because that's something I talk a lot about with, when I'm talking to prospects and CEOs and leaders is that, when they say like, hey, how do you define an ICP? How do you, grow a new product or whatever? Like, well, you got to look at signals. The market will give you signals. And, and when customers are already in, already in and you've closed it, there's signals within that relationship, whether it's you making, quarterly outreaches to check in to see how things are going, whether it's how they reply back on certain emails, whether it's the phone conversations, there are signals that customers are always giving out. It's that some of us are either inept to understand the signals, or we don't want to get it. And we're like, hopefully they'll just sign the contract again at the end of the year or whatever the case is. Like, we all give signals, but who's taking action on those signals?
So I'm going to give you two examples, kind of extremes of no signal. My family's owned 7 Honda vehicles. It's not out of loyalty to the brand. It's just they're really good vehicles, and I happen to like their trucks. My truck came out of warranty, 5 months ago. Do you think I've heard from Honda at all? From the dealer that was servicing that truck? From Honda itself saying, well, we know that you're driving a 5-year-old truck and it's out of warranty. Would you be interested in a new truck? No, nothing, crickets. So Honda doesn't, and I'm sorry to pick on Honda, Honda doesn't get to be surprised when my next vehicle isn't a Honda.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about, $10,000 or $5,000 consumer purchases. These are big money purchases.
Yeah.
And the other was, and I wrote about this, and I won't mention the brand name. I just changed cell phone carriers. And this is like the ultimate in missed signals. I was with my cell phone carrier for over 20 years. Lifetime value of my account was in excess of $50,000. It had 4 lines. 2 of the lines disconnected, attrited like 2 years ago. Nothing, not a word from the vendor. 3rd line left a year ago, not a word. And in the meantime, I was having service issues. Nothing, not a word. So now I'm down. My spend has dropped by 65, 68%. Nothing. I moved 0.3 of a mile, and I moved to a well-known dead zone.
Okay.
So now I've been in pain for a while.
Yeah.
But it wasn't untenable. Well, we had a big storm here like a month ago, knocked out. So now I couldn't use Wi-Fi calling. So I couldn't get on a hotspot. I could get sporadic texts. By the way, my son and daughter-in-law were expecting a baby at the same time. So I'm cut off from the world.
Man.
So now I've moved from pain to an untenable situation.
Yeah.
I've contacted my cell phone carrier, got cut off on an automated call. No call back, no check, no nothing.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, I was gone to another vendor who made it stupid easy. Download a free trial onto my phone, so I had a line from them and a line from my current carrier, so I could check signal everywhere I went. And then when I was ready to make a move, they had a 30-day trial. I was gone in 12 days.
Wow. And they made it easy to transition.
Like, I could have done it on the phone. I went into the store, and I'm glad I did, because there was they couldn't figure out the back end with the email, so it took an hour.
Okay.
But I ended up, so I changed. It was painless. I ended up with more features, and I'm spending less money.
Yeah.
And that's happening right now. And I use that because it's happening in tech right now, and it's happening because of AI. AI is allowing me to build new solutions, build them faster, build them for less money, more feature rich. I can add more features, and I can run circles around my competition. And I can go back to the customers or the prospects that I lost a year ago and say, hey, guess what I got now? And now you don't, and if you're not using a solution to test your signals, you don't get to be surprised when your customer churns.
I love that you're bringing that up, because I mean, it's like I said, I think that we just need to be more customer centric. And I don't want to use that terminology because it's overused, but we just got to focus on these signals and just understand that the client, the customer, is giving us these opportunities to save the deal all the time. And it's a matter for, like, are we willing to do it? And at that point, it's just like, is it worth it? is it worth this headache? Is it worth, and sometimes it's like, screw it. Like this other company is giving me the opportunity to make things like, easy to transition, headache free.
They want my
And
business. They
what's,
actually want my business.
yeah, exactly. So I'd rather have that kind of service. And I feel like as a consumer, as we're buying just like regular consumer goods, like we all act like that. But at the end of the day, like businesses are the same thing because the buyers are humans. The buyers are wanting that same service.
Yeah. So here's another really fun point to get into. Going back to that time when I was building my BDR team, first one, we started. So that's more than 10 years ago. We were talking about something called the Amazon effect. And we knew at some point it was going to bleed into business, and it has. And the Amazon effect is if I make it really, really easy on the buyer, I have a better chance of winning. So like, why do we cannot like Amazon, but why do we go to Amazon? Because the search works. It knows who I am. It knows my buying history. Some stuff I can just buy with one click. And if you're Prime and you don't like it, you could just send it back. It
Exactly.
doesn't get any easier than that.
Yeah.
And that mentality has bled into B2B buying. Why are you making it so hard on me? Why are you making me search for things? Why are you fighting with me when I have a question or making it hard for me to get service and support? And that attrition or churn problem, because the differentiator for most businesses now, and I do mean most, is service and support. It's not feature function. It's not the UI. In fact, the really like some of the best solutions I've seen now have such a stripped down, clean UI. I don't even have to train people anymore, which is great. So, but if that's where we are, then my differentiator, maybe it's price.
Yeah.
It's what happens when there's a problem, and there will be a problem. And the problem is probably going to occur at the worst possible time. 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, in the middle of a snowstorm, when you're expecting a baby. Like that's when this stuff happens. And you do not want to call your vendor and have your vendor either not answer the phone or make it very difficult or impossible to get help. Because when that happens, I promise you at the next renewal, your customer is going to leave.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm glad you're bringing that up. Not that I want customers to be leaving, businesses, but I'm glad that you're bringing this up and bringing awareness to it. I want to shift to something that you brought up that was interesting, and I want to give us enough time to kind of dive into this. Is the Altman gap, and so I've got to get into this. You recently kind of went after Sam Altman a little bit regarding the value of human experience, and this is a great transition because we're talking about human experience right now, and so for a founder, 25-year-old founder that's building an AI sales tool, what's the number one boring business fundamental that they're likely probably like ignoring?
Fundamental is that there are lots of experienced people out there that can teach you things, and you should be talking to them. Right? We love sports analogies in sales, right?
Yeah.
And every athlete has not a coach, multiple coaches. Right. We have, if you're playing golf, you have swing coaches and putting coaches and your caddy, like all these people. But business founders that I meet, like their mentors, if you will, are generally their advisors on that board. It's a very closed circuit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm saying, who else has walked this ground before who can tell me what to do and what not to do?
Yeah.
And the reason I went after Sam Altman, and I laughed because it's like, if you're going to pick a fight with somebody, pick a fight with somebody who can probably kick your ass.
Right.
That's the Boston in me. I can't help myself.
I love it. I still like, sometimes you just got to pick a fight, with, someone a little bit bigger than you. I'll punch them a little bit, maybe, I like it.
So the point that I made about Sam Altman in particular is around experience, right? I appreciate what he and others have built. Obviously, he's done amazing things at a much younger age than I have. I get it. But what he doesn't have, and you can't get, and without actually doing it, is experience. So, he's I think 45 years old, 40 years old, excuse me.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're born in 1985. Great, I get it. But that means that in the dot-com crash, he was 15 years old. And by the way, that people forget how massive that was on a global scale.
It blew everything up, literally.
Yeah. And then we go 7 years forward, 8 years forward, and we get to the banking crash, which, by the way, another cataclysmic event in business. People don't realize, especially in the United States, how close we were to the brink of disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, who within hours? And unless you were in the middle of that and you had to save a business, you can't, that's an experience. You can't learn that on AI. You can't learn it from somebody else. And the reason I picked up on that and picked on Sam was he had been asked what his biggest failure was. And he said his biggest failure was his business that he founded called Looped. I'd never heard of it. He founded it. He sold it in 2008 for $43 million. Poor Sam. Yay.
Wow. Okay.
But it was his biggest failure because it didn't get traction. I was like, if that's your biggest failure,
Whoa.
you have not learned the things that I've learned, because I've got failures written all over me. And AI, for as great as it is, AI doesn't have experience. It can't give you experience.
Yeah.
It can't interpret it. Most of it is still not context sensitive. And you know, the absence of that, I need somebody to be able to say to me, I know that's what you're thinking, but, and this brings us back to the human in sales. The best salespeople that you will see now and in the future are the ones who can sit down with an executive in a human-to-human setting on Zoom, whatever, and be able to say, tell me what you know about my business. Tell me about your problem. And then be able to say, well, that's really interesting. Let me tell you what I've learned just in the last 3 months of talking to customers.
Mm-hmm.
In a polite way, be able to tell the CEO of a company, you're wrong. Because what they want is they want somebody, again, make it simple and tell me something I didn't know that I didn't know. Because if you're just going to come in and tell me the same stuff that I read, you know, on your website and that I got through AI, I don't need you. So that's where, you know, kind of where I went after, you know, Sam Altman and just others. It's like, it's reverse ageism. And I know it is, before somebody jumps on me.
For sure. Yeah.
But there's a reason why you want somebody who's had the experience.
Yeah.
Like, you don't see, you know, a baseball team go on, like Ted Lasso's great. I just started watching it. It's wonderful.
Yes.
But in real life, no football team in the UK is going to say, we should go hire an American football coach. Of course not. Like,
No.
any more than, like, you know, if you want, you know, the Boston Red Sox are not going to go and hire a hockey coach. There's a reason for that. Even though the hockey coach may fully understand baseball, maybe even played it.
Let me ask you this, because this is the part that I get sometimes, where some people say that experience is important, but they want experience within, say, a certain vertical or niche or industry, and it's only that. Versus, like, I've seen the landscape, you know, and I've kind of like played in this and this, and they all have kind of the same kind of issues and challenges. Experience, let's say it's the same amount of time. Okay. It's just that one is just, you know, I'm not going to say hyper focused, but it's just been in one, you know, industry, and another has been like probably 2 or 3. Where do you kind of see that?
I think that industry experience is going to become a lot more important.
You think so?
So I've been pretty vocal about this too. I'm vocal about a lot of stuff, but very vocal about job hopping. And I understand there's a reason for it. I understand the economy the last 5 years has been difficult. It's hard to hold jobs. People get laid off. I know, you know, there was a huge layoff again, even today or yesterday. I get that. I'm empathetic to it. I'm sympathetic to it. I've been there. I've been laid off. I've been fired. Like, I've been all of those things. What I'm talking about is the people who, when you look at their LinkedIn profile or their resume, it's a pattern. Every 14 to 18 months, they're changing jobs.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem. Now, it's one thing if I'm changing jobs in the industry and I'm always like in hospitality, or I'm in cyber and I'm just moving company to company, moving up the ranks. I can kind of get that. I have maybe an issue with it, but I want to talk to you about it. But when you go from cyber to education to integration to like, and, and it's like you're just looking for a job. You're not
Mhm.
learning how to sell, and you're not learning an industry. So I don't know what the value is in that conversation that I mentioned before. When I sit you down with a C-level officer, you can't say to that person, "Well, listen, I've been doing this for 5 years. So I'm gonna tell you, like, this is what I know."
Yeah.
And that carries weight. So you know, if somebody says to me, what's the first thing I should do when I start a new job? Is you want to learn two things. You want to learn the product and the business that you're working for, and you want there and so that you can converse intelligently about the business problems and challenges they face. Which, by the way, AI is great at being able to say, what are the biggest problems facing higher education today? And it'll give and for depending upon the region in the UK and Canada, it will tell you. Wonderful. Now I can start to formulate a talk track. But if I can layer actual experience onto that,
Mhm.
like I'm going to blow the doors off of my competition.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense because I mean, and I get, I love the angle that you came with it, going after Sam Altman, for what he's done. But like, I think we all lose sight that the experience it plays a big role. I mean, from getting the mentors that have been there to help you kind of, I'm not going to say fast track your path, but maybe help you make better decisions through your journey is probably a better way of looking at it, to where you've been in the trenches and you know what it's like to get punched in the face, and like, man, this sucks. Um,
Yeah. And so, by the way, so the experience and what we're talking about, and I brought this up on my podcast a few weeks ago. AI lacks one big thing, and I don't think you can actually engineer it into AI because it's the same thing that happens as we age, and it's introspection.
okay.
In order to be introspective, you have to have experienced
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
You need to be able to look at it and go, like, oh, I know if I say this, I'm gonna like to a guy in the bar, I'm gonna get punched in the face. I know that. That's experience, and introspection is what tells you it'll be worth getting punched in the face. I'm gonna do it anyway, or I don't want to get punched in the face,
Yeah.
and I'm not gonna do it. That's the type of thing that we like. We have to experience that, and that comes with age,
Hmm.
which is why I kind of poked at Sam. He's like, dude, like I got 20 plus years on you.
Hmm.
I have experienced things that you hopefully will never experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you get up and you pontificate and you get somebody who's been through the experiences, who's been through these economic cycles to be able to say, I know what you think is going to happen. I'm telling you right now, it's not going to happen because it's been like this for hundreds to thousands of years. And technology isn't going to change that because going full circle, because it's humans.
Yeah. I
So
love this. I mean, this is I could talk all day about this. This has been great.
thank
Just kind of how you've expressed um the different stages of creating, helping a business grow and scale, but you're putting the human element and understand that you embrace the technology side of it. Like, those things have to work side by side, and I think those are kind of what you're leading into and how you kind of brought it full circle again.
thanks. Yeah, it's I'm an empath, if such a thing exists.
Huh?
And I'm extremely sensitive to what we're doing to humans in the workplace right now. With at AI is causing a whole series of anxieties with people about, am I going to lose my job? And when you do that to people, there is a natural evolutionary response to that. So there's a fight or flight.
Yep.
And in that, it destroys my ability to perform. So like it almost becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm afraid of AI. That AI is causing me anxiety because I don't know if I'm going to lose my job. That's impacting my ability to perform. And what happens? I get fired because I'm not performing.
Yeah.
And I get to the end of that and I blame it on AI, and it wasn't AI.
So true. Well, Mike, this was great. I really appreciate you taking the time. Where can
Appreciate it. Thank you.
followers, where can they find you? I know you're active on LinkedIn. I love reading your stuff. Like
Thank you.
I saw the Cortez. I was like, oh, I love me a good old school Cortez. Like, where can they follow you? Where can they find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. Like I said, I'm the only Michael Muhlfelder, so you can find me there. You can find me at calmoceansales.com. CALM Ocean Sales, one word. And yeah, if you reach out to me, you'll get a response. I'm an actual person. I'm not that popular that I can't like, that I'm like, I have no time for that. No, I will talk.
That's awesome.
I love communicating with people. I learn from people all day, every day. So please feel free to reach out. And if you do have a go-to-market problem, you need somebody on a contract basis for, to solve a particular problem, or as a head of sales, reach out to me. I'd love to have a chat.
Awesome. Mike, again, thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.